This is Back to Back.
Yo, what's up, back-to-backers? This is Willy Joy. Welcome to the show. This is Back to Back. This is my podcast. You're listening to it. You're tuned in. It's funny that people still say tuned in, like anyone's listening to the radio anymore. I guess it just still sounds cool. I don't know what you would really say about a podcast, like you clicked on it. It just doesn't sound as good. So, yeah, I don't know. That's just what you did. You tuned in. Now you're tuned in. And you're here with me. I'm happy to have you here. I've got heroes and villains on the show this week. One of my old friends, this episode was long overdue. He's just a legendary figure in the dance music world, one of the originators of the EDM trap sound, but even just saying that, it goes so much deeper than that. And I was really happy to be able to get out some of these stories on this conversation you're about to hear. And another thing you're going to learn while you listen to this, you got to keep up with Heroes and Villains because he's working on a bunch of new projects right now. We got to hint at it a little bit in the episode, but you're not going to want to miss it when it starts happening. So there's a link in the description of this episode where you can go follow him, keep up to date with everything he's got going on, and just soak up some of the game. There's something about him, he's just on these trends early before it's even a trend. Always a really forward-thinking guy. I tried to unravel that a little bit with him while we were talking, but I think that's one of those qualities that you can't always just put your finger on. It's just something about him. But it was great to see him. It was great to catch up. I'll tell you a little bit more about it in just a second because the setting was actually pretty awesome. But first, today, Back to Back is brought to you by Serato. There's just so much to say about Serato, so much to say about how they've changed the game over the years, enabled so many of your favorite artists to up their games and perform at a higher level, and now they're helping producers as well. I'm here to tell you about Serato Studio, which is their brand new beat-making tool here to up your studio game. And what they've done with Serato Studio that I think is really cool is that it's not only a great piece of production software, but there's a philosophy behind it. And the philosophy is basically that Serato Studio wants to help you unlock your creativity easier and faster than ever before. Serato Studio is streamlined, it's sleek, the interface is really, really intuitive. So when you start using Serato Studio, you're going to be able to get into your flow really easily, and it comes packed with tons of loops, samples, effects. It's great for manipulating audio if you work with samples a lot. They've got their proprietary pitch and time algorithm, so anything you want to do modifying audio, it's going to sound great. And there's tons of things to jumpstart your creativity as well. They've got sample packs from some of your favorite artists, people like Just Blaze, Fool's Gold Records, Flosstradamus, and more. You can sit down, knock out a beat super fast, and once you've got something you're really excited about, it's really easy to bounce stems out of Serato Studio into whatever your main DAW is. So they're not here to replace anything. They're just here to augment your workflow. It's a new tool for your tool belt. And right now, if you want to try it out, I've got a special deal just for listeners of Back to Back. If you go to Serato.com/studio and sign up for a subscription to Serato Studio, use the code WillyJoy2, that's WillyJoy and then the number 2 at checkout to get 2 free months of Serato Studio. 2 months, that's crazy. Nobody's giving you 2 months except for me right now. So head over, check them out, Serato.com/studio, and use code WillyJoy2 at checkout to get 2 free months of Serato Studio. All right? So, Heroes and Villains. This is the last of the episodes that I recorded on my most recent trip to LA. I'm actually about to take another trip out to LA very soon, so we'll have a lot more to tell you about that in the next few weeks. Actually working on some stuff I can't tell you about just yet, but exciting things in the works. But yeah, I met up with Heroes and Villains at a crazy, crazy spot in Beverly Hills where he was staying at the time. Really really just this nuts high-end building, walled off with beautiful high hedges, tons of crazy cars pulling in and out. It's kind of a spot for people who want privacy, kind of a celebrity spot. And we took over a very nice boardroom in this building. It was just the two of us sitting at a giant table meant for probably like 20 people. All glass walls, people walking by wondering what these two weird-looking people were doing, talking on microphones in their boardroom. At a certain point, we had to pause the interview because somebody wouldn't stop revving up their Lamborghini. The whole thing was great. I loved it. But beyond anything else, it was just great to catch up with Daniel, Heroes and Villains, who I hadn't seen in years. And like I said at the top, this was long overdue. Heroes and Villains is just one of the OGs of the scene. There would not be trap music in EDM as we know it without him. And it's not just that either. He's been influential kind of behind the scenes in a lot of different ways. Not only his work in music, not only working with Atlanta rap legends like Lil Wayne and T.I. and Jeezy, but also his work helping people recover from substance abuse, his outreach to other musicians who may be going through some of the things that he went through earlier in his life. He's really someone who's just dedicated himself to service, to whatever you want to call it, a higher purpose, be that helping other people, be that pushing forward music culture. There's so many stories in here that are just mind-blowing. So much shit that I think anyone listening to this needs to know. I'm stoked for you to hear it. I want to know what you think. So if you get to the end of this episode and your mind is blown, or you just liked something that you heard, or you're even just walking away with a fun story that you never knew about before, get in touch with me. Let me know. And if you want to help support the show, if you want to help me be able to keep making new episodes for you guys every single week, to get awesome guests every single week, the best way that you can give some support to this show, this is good because it's actually free and quick as well. All you got to do is help us spread the word. Word of mouth is how Back to Back grows. I could not do this without the supportive community of people behind me helping to get the word out about this show. So put up a post, tag us in your stories, send me a tweet. I'm at Willy Joy and the show is at Back to Back Pod. Let your friends know. If you've got somebody who just loves music as much as you do, let them know what we're doing over here. Let them know that they are welcome, that we want them to come join. And you can join the Discord as well. If you're super into this, if you really like thinking about these kinds of things, if you love music, you got to come chat with us on the Discord. I'm in there every single day talking to people. We've got a great community. If you're a producer, we're in there listening to each other's music, giving feedback. We're posting up memes. We're just talking about our day and the things we're going through. So the link for that is in the description of this episode. Come join the Discord. Even if you don't, just post something up. Let the world know you're listening. I love connecting with everybody out there. I'm, of course, going to be replying to you, reposting your content, all that good shit. That connection to me, that's the best part of doing this show. All right, so look, I've said enough. Enjoy it. This is me and Heroes and Villains back to back. Let's go. How long have you been here now? Like, what, a month?
Yeah, no, I've been out here off and on now for like almost a year, but I've been coming out here like every month for at least a few weeks at a time kind of thing.
Sure.
Lately, I'm visiting like 10 to 12 days, 14 days out here a month. And then now, I've been out here straight now for like 50 days.
Yeah.
And I was just kind of bouncing around from hotel room to hotel room, to be honest, because I was trying to manage this tailspin of a situation.
Yeah.
And
it happens.
Yeah. And now we're in this permanent place.
Well, that's good, man.
A lot more stable.
Yeah, this is, it's a beautiful place. There's like a feeling of, it's funny with like super luxury buildings, you start to be able to understand just a little bit the mentality of the ultra rich. because I'm like solidly middle class. I never came from like a super poor background, but I also was never super rich. And when I see, buildings like this, but just in general, like, we're in Beverly Hills, basically like Santa Monica, all that. There's like this weird sense of calm that even I feel just like sitting in this building. It's like safety, security. And there's something about that that's like, maybe that's how like super rich people feel all the time.
Maybe the outward confines that they may be in, but internally, a lot of times they're a fucking wreck.
Oh, absolutely.
So,
yeah. No, you're right. I mean, I didn't mean mentally, but
hey, if you have to be struggling internally, it's better to be struggling internally in a very like nice, secure, meditative setting than
Yes, absolutely. And you're right. I mean, that's a fair point, is that obviously all that money allows you to be in luxurious situations, but fixing the outside stuff never fixes the inside stuff.
Nope. And that's how we get into a lot of trouble, is by trying to fix the inside externally.
And I think you and I could probably talk about these kinds of ideas forever, because I know you have a lot to say about it. Were you ever, beyond your own personal experiences, like have you trained or taken, any kind of like formal knowledge about dealing with people with either drug or emotional issues, or really anything formal, or is it all kind of based off of your own experiences?
No, I've done the formal training. Yeah. So I did training for being an interventionist, and I got my like certifications for drug and alcohol and interventions and counseling support.
When did you do that?
A few years ago. So my life kind of took this like weird turn where
and we'll get into the whole thing.
But a few years back, I started to open up about my sobriety, and people kind of started coming to me for help, and I wanted to help, and I wanted to be of service. And when I started getting into that, I was like, well, let me go ahead and do the necessary steps so that I can walk into a room with, because what was happening is I was walking into rooms with like clinicians, and they were like, what the fuck are you doing here? And now I can walk into that room and kind of be like, I know what the fuck I'm talking about.
Right,
so
yeah.
Now you have to listen to me.
Yeah, it's an interesting... Well, that's I never thought about this too, is the divide that would be between, sort of professionals and then the people who have been through it. Because, I think there's that commonly said thing, I think a lot of people know this at this point, that oftentimes, the best therapists are the ones who have dealt with those issues in their own lives.
Definitely.
But then I also wonder did you ever sense an attitude from someone who just, had the full thoroughbred, like professional background, and you're coming in from...
I still get it.
Really?
Yeah. But it's fine, because I am in this cool gray area where I am outside of that world and also like respected in that world, and then also in music and in arts and creativity. So I kind of exist in this cool gray area. I can do things that clinicians can't do legally. I can spend time with a client. I can spend time with a person like that. They just can't. I can connect with them in a way that they can't, but also like with the legal things that they have to go through and the licensing that they have to do. There's like certain boundaries that they can't cross that I don't have. Right. So, you're not going to have a clinician running into a trap house pulling somebody out, but I have, and I can. So that kind of thing, like I can be on the front lines. And I have a lot of clinicians that are like, man, like I really like wish that I had that kind of time, and that ability to be able to connect.
Yeah, that's interesting. I never even thought about that. Well, let's maybe frame what we're talking about a little more.
Yeah.
It's crazy, man. The last time I remember seeing you was in a club. oh God, I don't even remember where. Maybe it was in Atlanta, but either you were playing or I was playing, and it was after the night was over. And I mean, this must have been, I think it's been a long time, man, like 5 years, maybe something like that.
Maybe. I want to say it might have been in Miami.
That could be, actually. It could, yeah, maybe for WMC.
I want to say it was like Miami.
Yeah.
Which would have been like 2014, I think.
Right. Yeah. Which is, I mean, 5 years ago, but it seems like another lifetime, right?
5 years in the EDM world is I mean,
it's like dog years.
Yeah. Yeah. You don't even exist anymore after 5 years. Like,
that's very true. Yeah. Well, and certainly you, as far as heroes and villains goes, were in a very different place in your own career, in your sound, in kind of in the whole thing. I mean, so if we say it's 2014, is that, I mean, that's kind of right around the peak of what the music people know you for, right?
Yeah, for sure.
It's not that long ago, man.
I know. Yeah, I would say we released "Run the Trap" EP in like 2012, and then in 2012, 13, and 14, those were like, I think that was probably the years that the output that most people would know.
Yeah, and so. Are you from Atlanta originally?
Savannah. Originally. Yeah, it was just 4 hours south.
Okay, yeah. So, you know, that region,
oh, yeah,
that's you.
And like growing up, like every weekend I'd be in Atlanta, because Savannah is a small town. Like, it's a small city. You know, it's like a few 100,000 people.
Yeah. Are there who else would I know who was born in Savannah?
Big Boy.
Okay.
From Outkast.
That's right.
Yeah.
I knew there were a few.
Yeah, he's from Savannah. There was a rapper named Camouflage that I went to high school with who was killed shortly after I left Savannah. But yeah, he was from Savannah. You know, Jeezy was from a little bit outside of Savannah, like an hour outside of Savannah. So, you know, Georgia's an interesting place.
It's a place I love to visit. The culture, the people, just the vibe. I love it every time, but I have to imagine growing up there is something very different.
Well, Savannah sucked. Like, just to be real, you know, there's nothing to do in Savannah when I was growing up there in the 90s other than like get in trouble and do drugs.
Yeah, fair enough. Is that what you were doing?
Yeah. That was the only thing you could do. And we would all like pile into cars and like hop up to Atlanta, and we'd go to like Satellite Records and Rewind Records, which actually Mayhem worked at when he was 16.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
Oh, that's crazy.
Me and Anthony, we've known each other since we were 15 years old.
Wow. I always sensed there was that kind of connection with you guys, but I never knew it went that far back.
Oh, yeah. It goes really far back. And like at the time, like drum and bass was like kind of like the underground like dance music, I guess, at the time.
Yeah.
And,
which is what, like late 90s, early 2000s?
Yeah, like 98, 99. And yeah, like we linked up then because people were like, I was DJing in Savannah and I was 15 DJing in clubs, and everyone, like the people around me, they were like, yeah, there's this other DJ in Atlanta. He's like your age or a few months older than you. So we were both like the young DJs in Georgia, like that were actually playing shows.
Right. I remember him telling me that he also started really young. How did it, for you, I mean, how did you even find yourself in that position playing in clubs at 15? There must have been something even before 15 then that, you know, have you just been musical from very young?
So I got this copy of like Pretty Hate Machine on cassette tape. Funnily enough.
Yeah. And you're wearing the Nine Inch Nails shirt.
And on the back of the cassette tape, what the fuck? The back of the cassette, there's a picture of Trent Reznor like on his knees, right? And I was like, well, where's the band? And I was probably 11 at the time, maybe 10 or 11. And I was like, well, where's the band at? I couldn't wrap my head around this one guy that like did all the part. Like, how did that even work? I didn't understand like 4-track recording or any of that. And that kind of sent me down that path to eventually become an engineer, to become a producer, like, and all that. So how I got into that, I wanted to figure out that process and kind of reverse engineer it. And then And then,
which is a really interesting like concept for an 11 or 12-year-old to even have at that point.
Yeah, but I wasn't like consciously,
Of course not. But I always like to try to trace like where do those kind of instincts come from, because I think a lot of other people probably just listened to that album and thought like, I like this music, or, yeah, I'm angry. Like I think a lot of 13-year-olds just be like, yeah, fuck you. As opposed to like
how did they do this?
Right,
how did they make this? Yeah, maybe. I don't know. That's just kind of what it sparked. And so then I wanted to learn how to produce music. But I didn't understand like structure, bars, like any BPM, like none of that. So I was like, well, let me learn how to DJ. Yeah. And that taught me the framework and the structure. And then also like, let me see what people like in a club environment. Right. Yeah. So I'm curious, at that time, growing up in that area of the country with what was happening musically in that era, have you always sort of had these diverging interests, say the Nine Inch Nails plus Dirty South hip hop that was going on? Yeah. I grew up on like my parents, for instance, they would play me records from like Black Sabbath and classical music. Like that's, oh, those are good parents right there. Yeah. They have a really good taste in music. They're great parents. They kind of raised me on this kind of foundation of that. And then from there it was like punk rock, like hardcore punk, like Black Flag, and like stuff like Discharge and like heavy like 80s like hardcore. Right. And then 3-6 Mafia and Scarface and UGK and I liked Outkast, but Outkast wasn't I like them, and I definitely obviously like appreciate them, and they're incredible. But they didn't like what they were rapping about didn't super like connect with me. Sure, of course. But stuff like 3-6, like the dark, like kind of heavier trap stuff. Right. At the time, I was like, this is that kind of aggression. I mean, I think there's links you could draw between that and Nine Inch Nails and punk music. Well, exactly. I mean, trap music is the new punk music. Absolutely it is. In its ethos, at its core, that's what it is. And it might be the delivery system is different and the content might be different, but at its core, what it is it's working class youth angry at their situation, trying to get out by any means. Yeah, that's a perfect way to put it. And somebody else said to me, I mean, I think there's actually a famous quote, is, punk is not a sound, it's an attitude, right? Yeah. And so if you think about it in those terms, it could sound like anything, but it's all coming from the same place. Absolutely. So were your parents at all, did they support you kind of just getting out in these clubs super young? Was there any kind of, No, there was no pushback on that. And they were like, I mean, the fact that I was getting into clubs and working them before I'm even legal, and I look young still. Right. So I looked really young then. How did you even get put on at that age? Were you just kind of good off the bat, or did you have a connection? That was good enough to definitely get in and hold my own. Yeah, like my friend group, they were all older. Like a lot of my friends were like in college or college age. So they were all like friends with club owners and GMs. And so it just kind of, it's like, hey, like, Daniel's been killing it at house parties and warehouse parties. And one thing just kind of led to another, and I got these opportunities. And at the time, there's no electronic music in Savannah. It was all country music, like country western bars, and then like the one or two rap clubs, Frozen Paradise, and then another kind of like other rap club, and then there were the gay clubs. There was like the drag clubs, like Club One and Felicia's. So I would play at the drag clubs, and I was like DJing drag shows, And that was the kind of environment that I was in, like early.
And what kind of music would you play there?
Like dance music and mix it with hip hop, even then.
Like specifically, do you remember songs you would play? I'm just curious about if I try to imagine a drag club in Savannah in, the late 90s.
I mean, stuff like Stardust, Music Sounds Better With You, Danny Tegnalia, I remember I learned how to beat match on the Roots album.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
And then there's the end of You Got Me, that like Questlove goes into like drum and bass at the end, and then I would mix out of that into a drum and bass record.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Damn, I want to do that right now.
On vinyl.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Of course. Yeah,
there was no CDJs then.
That's the craziest part too, man. I wonder, there's always all these debates about, there's these still to this day vinyl purists who...
Why?
Yeah. Oh, I agree. I'm not one of them. But I always do wonder, like, is there anything that we learned doing it that way that, we can take with us that other people who started now might not have?
I learned how to structure music by reading the grooves of the record.
Sure, yeah.
So you can see the drop and the breakdowns and that visually.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's something that just doesn't really exist anymore. I mean, you can look at the waveform,
right?
But it's
a
so
different thing. Yeah. And you just made me think too. I mean, because you're working with physical objects, these records, I mean, there's a certain level of precision. Well, it's weird. It's both sides. You had to be very precise in your decision making because
you had to commit.
Yeah, you had to commit.
You are limited by the amount of time, like how quick you can grab the next record, pull the old record off the platter, put the new record on, throw the needle on in place, get it queued up, get it beat matched, and mix in, right? Like, you actually have physical limitations, whereas now you can just scroll to the next track or the next cue point or whatever, and you're like, that's not going to work.
Yeah, and I was going to say then there's this other imprecise part where obviously there is no sync button, it's not digital, so a lot of your mixes were not 100% perfect, which in a weird, like, and I can still tell when somebody is mixing that way, and I connect with it in a certain way. I'm not saying that it was better back in the day. Like, I'm really not the old man on the porch, but there is something about it when I hear that sloppiness. Maybe it just reminds me of when I was a kid and I would kind of just, would be more about the style. If you miss
sloppy DJing, I can take you to some places.
I mean, that's fair. That's fair. Yeah. I mean, you can still find it pretty much. You can find that at some big festivals. Man,
I mean, look, man, I do love things about vinyl. Like, I have a vinyl collection that I've been growing at the house.
Yeah.
Of just classic records that I love. But do I miss going out and DJing vinyl? Never.
Oh, no, I don't miss that
once.
at all.
Not once have I ever been like, man, I really just kind of miss lugging a bunch of vinyl around.
Having to find a place to park my car close to the club so I could carry the crates in.
The worst.
If you're in these clubs DJing young age, I mean, was this already in your head? Was this the lifestyle you wanted?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. It's funny. My mom, she actually found this paper that I wrote when I guess I did go to school. And I probably had to been in like the 8th grade or something. And it was just talking about being an international like touring DJ and producer.
Wow.
Yeah. And it was like these goal markers. Like, I could make this much money, play these things. And I had done all the things on the list. And she was like, she sent it to me. She's like, I can't believe that you wrote this like when you were a kid.
That's
and
insane.
You've actually done this stuff.
Oh, man.
and no one's more blown away by it, I think, than her, because she's just like, this is something that I was doing in my bedroom. And I imagine it's kind of being like, when parents, like I used to skateboard too, and I can imagine like it being like the same parents of like kids that skated, and then skateboarding blew up and made like all these millionaires. skating, and they were like, I can't believe that you're a pro skater off of this annoying thing that you were doing.
Of course.
I think it's like the same thing. They're like, I can't believe it.
Yeah, no, that's insane, man. And I'm wondering too, we sort of talked about that your influences were pretty wide ranging and that it just made sense to you from an early age to combine a lot of different styles and sounds. But I think it's worth mentioning that was not commonplace the way it is now in terms of the regular DJ world. Mm-hmm. So I'm sort of wondering what the reaction to you publicly was in those early days when you were throwing in all these different styles and sounds.
I didn't really have a lot of backlash to doing that in any real stage. Like in any developing stage, I should say, of like my career, really. When I started getting resistance to that was when I started to kind of branch outside of my like friend group or support base, right?
Interesting.
But even when I was a kid, I was, people were kind of like maybe expecting that, or there was like this kind of expectation, maybe, like, oh, okay, this is what he's going to do, or this is cool, this is different. And then like these other people like it, so then I'm going to like, that kind of thing. Yeah. And then fast forwarding, right, with like trap music, EDM trap, like, when everything was just dubstep, I mean, no one would book me in Atlanta really, because I was working in rap studios, and then Wes actually, Diplo, he was like, you need to like break out of the studio and like start doing your own thing, And so like I built my own brand, and I had to learn how to do that. And then I started DJing out the records and the instrumentals and stuff like that. And no one would really book me at their nights. But I had enough friends in Atlanta, like, and from these different groups. So I had like, I had friends from the rap community. I had friends that were all in bands, and then I had like scene chicks, like, you know what I mean? And I got a night, and I filled it with my friends, and then that became a very influential night that I did with Mayhem.
Right. And what was that called?
That was called Heavy.
Yeah.
And we had John 12th Planet play the first one, and it was this bridge of, at the time, early dubstep, kind of pre-Skrillex dubstep. So it was like Benga and Koki and like the kind of
scream.
Yeah, very like minimal kind of sound. And Atlanta rap music and Southern rap music. And so the format of the night is we would play rap music, because I mean, Atlanta rap music is just what we do. It is our main export, right? And so kind of bringing in this other sound from outside of Atlanta with like the dubstep or like the bass music, and we connected it with the Atlanta audience by playing rap music from beginning of the night, 10 o'clock till 1 a.m. And then at 1 a.m. when everyone's kind of like lit, then we start dropping dubstep records on top of these rap records and rap instrumentals. And it popped, that's the height of the night. And that was the formula.
Wow. And it's cool to hear you talk about kind of the early days when it was all just in your head, and then now you're actually, you've made your own night, established your own identity as an artist, and you're sort of making those childhood ideas real in a way that connects with a large number of people, man. That's got to be a very validating feeling in a way.
Yeah, it was. Especially when, at the time, right, like doors were shut, and they were like, no, at the time, like everything was kind of like electro house. Like Castlevania had this huge night called Fuck Yes.
And this was, now we're talking about like late 2000s, kind of like Bloghouse era.
Yeah, 2006, 7, 8, 9. All that kind of span. So it was it was Justice, Mastercraft, that whole Ed Banger sound,
right? And
the Castlevania had a night called Fuck Yes, and Treasure Fingers actually was the resident there as well, and that was kind of like the rite of passage if you were like an 18-year-old in Atlanta,
right?
It was unbelievable, the vibe. It was crazy. It was packed every week, and it was just, the vibe was through the roof. And so that's what, you have one thing that's successful, everyone wants to try to replicate it. So that's what every club tried to do. And then so I'm coming in with like 808s and like, snare rolls and like rap samples. And they're like,
what do I do with this?
Yeah. Like, no, we're 4/4, like, blazing electro, which is, it's cool. I love that vibe.
Right.
And it was a great time, but I was like, I had a different vision.
Of course. And where did the Sloppy Seconds night fit into that pantheon? Because that was happening around the same time too, right?
Yeah. So that night originally had started with Caleb and Clever as kind of like a collaboration. So like it was kind of like this kind of like electro party rock kind of party, So it was it wasn't necessarily like one style. It was just kind of club music.
Right. Yeah.
So it's like Be More Club.
Hipster vibes.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I think Sloppy Seconds, is the first time I ever played in Atlanta. And I still remember the whole night, man. That was such a fun party, such a good vibe. Caleb is one of my good friends. I just went to his wedding, and Will is another one of my good friends, and we had started this other night called Vault, and we had like a side project called Vault Boys, and we're all involved with Sloppy. And I've been involved with Sloppy for, I don't know, like 9 years now. Is it still going?
Yeah.
Holy shit.
I think it might be the longest running indie underground party in America at this point.
I hadn't even considered that it could still be running. That's amazing.
Yeah, and if we've done some really like legendary stuff. I brought out Gucci there.
Oh, wow. And for the listeners, we're talking about a very small club, pretty like what? It's almost like dive bar vibes.
It's a dive bar vibe for sure, but it's a little bit bigger than that. But the capacity is like 500 people.
Right. And
it is literally under the parking lot. And there's only a few venues like MJQ. This is where the Sloppy Seconds is at. There's only a few venues like MJQ in the world that I've played at. And it's a really special place. It's probably it is one of my favorite places to play.
I wish I could go back there and play again, man, because I still, like I said, I remember that so vividly. And if you think about how many shows we've played that we don't really remember, it's most of them.
Well, it reminds me of this club that Kruder and Dorfmeister put together in Vienna. It's called Flex, and it's in an old abandoned subway station.
Wow.
And it's the exact same vibe. And when I played there, I was like, I feel like I'm playing at MJQ. This is amazing. Wow. There's these few spots in the world that have this very real, authentic vibe. So there's no bottle service.
Right.
It's a cash only bar. There's no VIP. And
there's like barely even a green room, right?
No, there is no green room.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
No, there's none of that.
Yeah.
So you kind of walk in this tunnel from the parking lot, and then you're in the club. It's packed, and you'll have like all these different personalities in there. So artists like Trinidad James, for instance, kind of were born from this environment, this kind of cross section of
melting pot,
Atlanta hipster, like rap music, trap music. You just get everything in there. So I've had Janet Jackson and Jimmy Dupree in there, or Owen Wilson and or Ben Stiller, and no one has their phone out. No one's taking selfies. No one's taking pictures. It's not an LA.
Yeah, I think that's another
vibe.
Key, right? Man, that's so
and
cool.
That's part of Atlanta culture too. Is that like Atlanta? It's just too cool, right? To be honest, like Atlanta's just like, oh, whatever, we like the culture of the city just doesn't really give a fuck, because we have huge artist personalities that are just at wherever, and there's no paparazzi culture, there's no TMZ culture, there's none of that not like you don't have that at the airport. You don't have that at popular restaurants or whatever. None of that.
Well, and so, you mentioned some names, Gucci Mane, Trinidad James, and I know obviously you're connected to a whole bunch of rappers, Atlanta or not. How did you get into the engineering work that you started doing, before the club nights really started popping off?
So I lived in Philly for a little bit, and that's actually where I met Diplo.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
Back when he DJ'd at Silk City, and actually we met because my roommate at the time was an Apple genius, and he worked at the Apple store, and Wes brought in either his iPod or it was his laptop or his iMac, I guess, at the time.
Right. Yeah.
And my roommate Lee, who now works for Splice, actually, he was going through his computer to fix it, and he like pulled up his iTunes, and it was just like Bone Crusher, Donna Summer, like all these like rap records with like really obscure music. And Lee was like, "Oh my God, you have to meet my roommate because you guys literally play the same music."
That's amazing.
And Lee's a producer as well, so we had a studio in the top floor of our house in like a row home in South Philly, a terrible area of Philadelphia. All of Philly is a terrible area, to be honest with you.
Philly's a rough town, yeah.
Yeah, but we lived in South Philly in a row home, like one street over from where Beanie Siegel's mom lived.
Oh, wow.
We had this kind of studio up there, and he would, like Wes would kind of pop by, or we would just, we just stayed in touch, and I would go to Holotronics. And so Holotronics was such a groundbreaking event because at the time, club nights were very segregated with their sound and their style. You had the disco night, you had the rap night, you had the reggae night, you had the drum and bass night, you had these different nights dedicated to different things. And then here comes Wes and Low Budget, his partner, and they were just mashing up all these different genres in one night. So you would hear everything in the space of a night, and it was very groundbreaking at the time. And it was the party, and they would announce it the day of on this website, and I think holotronics.com or something like that. And they'd be like, Holotronics tonight, and it was in North Philly, and they used to sell these like huge beers, these oblong like beers. It was like some like Armenian hall or something.
It's Ukrainian, I think.
Maybe that's what it is. Yeah. And it was just a great time, and that also kind of expanded the boundaries of like what an experience could be. Right.
Yeah. And then how does that connect to you engineering rap records?
So I started engineering and stuff when I was in Philly.
Right.
Just kind of like recording local rappers. And then I was valet parking cars at Embassy Suites also, and being a drug addict.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah.
And I was going through like a lot of my own like kind of grief process. I lost my dad when I was 19 due to cancer, and I didn't have the tools to be able to cope, and so that like sent me down like this kind of path of maladaptive coping mechanisms.
Yeah.
Well, I fell back on the crutch that I knew, which is like, I can just numb out and not have to deal with this. So I had a lot going on.
Yeah.
But through that, I was like, let me just, I can just record artists, like, and I've always wanted to learn how to put these records together, these big songs together, like I was into underground stuff, and I wanted to learn how to do it, I guess, for real.
Well, yeah, I mean, we were talking about the 9 Inch Nails thing, right? Like, how did he do that?
Yeah. So I had a friend that was in Atlanta, and he was working in studios, and he was actually doing post-production for Adult Swim shows. And he was just like, look, man, just come back down here. Like, just come back down here and literally just work your way in to the scene here. And so I left Philly, and I packed up the car, and I went down to Atlanta, and I literally, like, I got in through him and some of his connections, but I got on really by going door to door to studios and just being like, this is what I've done, this is what I've worked on, this is what I can do. And at the time they were like, well, we can give you an internship. And I'm like, fuck that, I got a dope habit to support. Like, and I'm getting dope sick. Like, I don't want to fucking deal with this shit.
College credit is not what you're looking for.
Yeah, exactly. And so there was this there's this place called Atlanta Pro Audio, and if you were at the time, right, record labels were giving out like label deals to just dope boys. Like if you had one record that popped, which was always like a dope boy maybe behind it, like pushing the money behind the record, the labels would be like, okay, like you're getting a label deal, and dope boys being dope boys and the dope boy mentality, they're like, okay, well, we're gonna take, like, why are we going to spend this money in a studio to record? I'm just going to make my own studio, and then we can charge other people, and then also like we can also do other stuff in the other rooms.
Right.
You know what I mean? It gives us a place of operations.
Yeah.
So
it's almost like the old school like mafia front, like storefront kind of thing.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. So if you were buying a lot of gear, like professional equipment, you would go to Atlanta Pro Audio. You wouldn't go to Guitar Center for that, right? So literally right up the street is Atlanta Pro Audio, and they would do stuff like they would sell Neve consoles or Icon consoles or whatever. And so there was like 3 employees there, and I would just show up at 9 a.m. every day and act like I worked there. Basically, I would just like hang out, and I was broke, and I had like no money for food even, so I would eat their lunch, and sell gear, but I wasn't getting commission off of it. And but I knew, right, people come in, they buy the gear, they need somebody to come hook it up.
Yeah.
So then I would get cash by going out and like hooking it up for them, like hooking up Control 24s, like monitors, like flooring, whatever, to make some cash. And then finally, Chick, who's the owner, he was like, Daniel, like you can't just keep showing up to work and selling equipment, and like the commission's going to my guys, but I can't hire you. You can't just keep coming here. Right. And so he like made a few phone calls, and then in walked this guy. His name was Cliff, and he was building out a B room at the studio called Dirty South, and he was asking me about gear, and I was telling him, and then he was like, come out to the studio tomorrow. And so I came out, and he showed me around. They had this sick A room with like a Icon and like distressors and like
like top
the
of the
C800 mic, the Sony C800 mic, which was like it still is one of the top of the line mics, but it was like the top line mic then.
Right.
And it was sick. And the studio was owned by Terrell Owens, who at the time was just like this cash cow, like just cash flowing in and out of the studio. And he was like, what do you think? Like, this is what we want to do in the B room, blah, blah, blah. Like, what do you think of the studio? And I was like, man, it's gorgeous. I love it. And he was like, do you want a job? And I was like, yes, when do you want me to start? And he was like, tomorrow. And then that next day, my first session was with Lil Wayne.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh,
and
man.
then...
Did you even know what to do at that point?
Like what, engineering-wise?
Like technically, yeah.
Yeah. Like I had like learned Pro Tools and
okay, gotcha.
all of that, yeah. And so that was like the first session, and then it was like, it took off from there. Jeezy had his offices a few doors down from the studio. And so he came in, he booked out the studio for 3 to 4 months, and we did his second album there. And so I was assistant engineering and assistant mix engineering, and then also engineering on all the records. And then from that, I was wrapping up the Jeezy album, and I got a call. So, and you got to think like, I'm the only white kid in Atlanta making trap music.
Right. Yeah. I mean, yeah, let's emphasize that for a minute, because that is very significant.
Yeah. Like, and word got out quick.
Yeah.
Like, who is this white boy? Like, and I was very punk rock looking. Like then, like I had like this kind of mullet with shaved sides and like different colors in my hair, and like, tight jeans, which again now doesn't seem like it's a crazy thing, but then I mean you couldn't even get skinny jeans back then. Like I had to wear girls' jeans. Like I'm serious.
Oh, I believe you. Yeah.
Like you couldn't even get skinny jeans for men at the time. And so, like, this is when like Soulja Boy hadn't even come out yet. So like, you got to remember that, you know, if you can look back at like the memes and shit of Soulja Boy when he came out, and everything was just super oversized, and they had the super tall tees. And so here I am in this environment, and I have like studded belts on backwards, and you know, I stuck out, but I knew rap music inside and out,
right?
You know, and I grew up around this, and I grew up in these environments. You know, I went to an all black school my entire life, like, and so it was nothing for me to be in environments being the only white kid, but still maintaining my own identity in that space,
right?
And I got respect for that because I'm not trying to be anything that I'm not. I'm like, you know.
Yeah, I would actually probably imagine that a lot of people wanted to be around you more just to kind of soak in that kind of energy and pick up something that might be different from their background, you know?
Right, yeah. And I think also, well, to speak to that too, we kind of realized that we had more in common than we had in different, like, you know, because we were from the same backgrounds a lot of times.
Yeah, that's a beautiful moment too, man. I've had those kind of moments. I have not been in like rap studio environments nearly as much as you have, but especially at the start of my career, I was doing stuff like that a little more. And yeah, I have such fond memories of that and those connections. And even just personally, me being around people with backgrounds that I didn't have and that I never would have been exposed to, it was very valuable for me in my development, you know? I think that kind of stuff is key. Yeah,
absolutely. And it, you know, it lends itself to all sorts of things, like different perspectives of records or different connections, and it's just like this kind of melting pot, right?
And that's what we were saying about punk too earlier, right? Is that it's connected by an attitude more than a sound or a background.
Exactly. And so word starts getting around, like, who is this like punk rock white kid making trap music with Jeezy? Right?
Yeah.
Like just even and like just even on paper it sounds fucking crazy. And so then I got a call from we were wrapping up the album, and I get a call from T.I. And like I pick up the phone and I was like, yeah, who's this? And he's like, this Tip. And I'm like, Tip? And he's like, yeah, this Tip. I'm like T.I. Tip? And he's like, yeah, bro, this Tip. What you do? What you going on? And I'm like, you know, I'm just, you know, wrapping up Jeezy's album. You know, what's up? And he's like, where you at? And I was like, I'm at the studio. And he's like, bet. He's like, I'm around the corner. He's like, I'm gonna send you the address. Like, come by.
Wow.
So then I like wrapped up my day, and then I went over there, and they had just gotten, they just leased this huge building. It was like 30,000 square feet. It was like huge, and multiple, like 2 floors, pre-production rooms, 3 full studios, 2 smaller studios. But like there was nothing built out really. Just the A room was kind of built out. The feds actually had, like, it was a studio before, and the feds raided it and took everything. And so like Tip came in and took it over. And him and his manager, label manager, Jason Jeter, they kind of walked me around, and the studio manager, Elliot, they kind of took me around, and they were like, you know, again, like, what do you think?
Right.
Like, what are they paying you over there? We'll double it.
Wow.
Come over here.
It's hard to turn that down.
And then I was there for like 5 years, and did 3 albums with him. And worked with everyone that came through the building. Yeah,
which must be basically just the pantheon of every rapper that everybody knows from Atlanta.
Everyone, and outside of too, like everyone from Justin Timberlake to Rick Ross to Missy Elliott to
man,
Bone Thugs even. Like, I mean, like everyone would come through there.
So, I mean, yeah, we could, there's a whole nother podcast in there about the stories from that era. But I'm not even going to, unless you have one that's like really popping out in your mind right now, I don't think, otherwise I'll get stuck on that forever.
I mean, yeah, I got a bunch of stories. Not all of them I can tell.
All right, well, give me one you can tell, and then we'll move on if one comes to mind.
So just to give an indication of, I guess, like the different environments that I was in. And when I wasn't in like a professional rap studio, I was in the studios off of like Cleveland Avenue, where they were like wrapping up like bricks in the other room. Okay. So I was, even when I was in like the professional studio, I was like spending my other time in the trenches,
right?
You know, because I was very just much in that world. And I remember, so this was before T.I. got arrested on the gun charges, right? And so this is still, there's two sides to T.I. There's the T.I. and there's Tip. And Tip is the version of him that I know, the street version. That's what everyone calls him. This was his mom's called him. Everyone calls him that. And that's kind of like who he is at his core.
Sure.
And T.I. was like the business person.
Yeah.
T.I. is who came out of federal corrections.
Yeah. The guy with the suits.
Tip is who went in, right? And so this is still Tip era. And he had got this, he was working on this deal, I think with like Verizon. And these like suits come over and they're coming to the studio and they're like, you know, they're amped to have their real Atlanta rap experience, right?
Yeah.
And they're just completely out of their element, and walks Tip, and he's got like weapons and like just like, and he's got his shades on, and like, I mean, there's just like, you know, there's all the elements, all the outer lying elements are all in the space,
right? And
these people were so like visibly nervous, and he's walking around with like strapped and like just music going. He's just like showing out, and I'm just like, these poor folks, man.
Yeah,
these poor folks. Like, you cannot wait to get out of here.
Yeah, that's a good way to torpedo a deal, man.
But you know, that's also kind of his mentality at the time.
Sure, of course.
Like, just because he had some success, commercial success, like this is the thing. With these artists, especially that come from these environments, there's a tremendous amount of PTSD, and he himself was experiencing a tremendous amount of PTSD because he just lost Phil, his best friend, in a shootout. So like, they were in Cleveland and they got opened up on, and the bus got hit and killed his best friend in front of him. And so he didn't trust anybody. He was isolated, and he was suffering his own PTSD around it.
Of course.
And just because now you have this artist who's grown up in a critical, violent environment that now has had some success with like a few records, and now has access to all this money, now they could become a target. And something that I just recently talked to him about like a month ago is the mentality that artists get into, the survival mentality that they got them to where they are at, that traps them then when they are successful.
Right.
So you have to shed that survival mentality, and because it no longer is going to serve you.
Well, and you don't have the resources oftentimes to know how to do that, right? Because, I mean, the labels are giving you money and people are giving you love and praise, but nobody's really trying to actually help you, right?
Right. And a bigger conversation is also like the stigma of mental health and receiving help and getting help, especially for the Black community.
Yeah.
And that's a much bigger subject to tackle.
No, absolutely. But it's, I think, absolutely worth mentioning because that's a huge component.
Yeah.
And so I guess for you too, you know, you've mentioned a couple times that you were going through your own issues with drugs throughout this period. How was that, you know, especially if you're in these kinds of environments where probably drug use was around you and accepted to a certain point? I mean, how did it evolve for you through that period? Because you were it sounds like you were still able to do a lot of work, to become known as a valuable artist, a valuable person to work with. Were there kind of like two sides to your life? Nah,
it was just that side. So, you know, I literally worked in an environment that allowed an addiction to flourish. Right. I mean, I'm working 17 hours a day in windowless rooms.
Yeah.
All night. I mean, around other drug addicts.
Sure.
I mean, it's, like, for an addict, it's perfect. I mean, I really had the perfect scenario.
But you still got work done, I guess, is what I'm interested in.
Well, yeah, I mean, just because I'm using doesn't mean that I'm, not going to do the main thing that allows me to keep using, right? And yeah, I mean, it was all kind of tied together.
Yeah.
It was, it wasn't like, look, if I couldn't be high on the job, then I probably wouldn't do that job.
Right. Yeah. That's
so it's all right. Like I just managed to get everything done, and I managed to do good work and make like valuable like contributions. Right. While also like having struggling with addiction.
And so, if you're comfortable with it, what are we talking about? What drugs are we talking about?
Oh, heroin.
Okay. That's what I thought, but just,
But like anything.
Right. Yeah.
Like,
whatever's there.
But definitely like the drug of choice for sure.
Yeah. And so if we move a little forward, this is just a component of your life, and the work is happening and you're around these big artists. At a certain point, you start wanting to step out on your own. You get that advice from Diplo.
Yeah. And Coach K. So I met Coach, who's like an uncle to me still. Actually, he was actually going to stop in today.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but he got on another flight, and I think he's coming in later on this week.
Okay. And for the listeners, I just never know who's listening, but, Coach K, legendary Atlanta rap, like, guru.
He is like that's almost like putting it like...
It's hard to overstate, yeah.
Yeah, he is even more than that. Like, he's just kind of this cultural, like, steward, I guess. Like, he just... Because he was involved in Sloppy Seconds at its inception.
Oh, was he really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, he owned the club that Sloppy was at.
And to go from that to, discovering the Migos,
well, but he managed Jeezy.
He managed Jeezy.
So he managed Jeezy when I was working with Jeezy, and that's how we linked up. And then he managed Gucci and Waka.
Yeah.
And then he like went and found the Migos and QC and is managing Cardi B, and I mean
just insane.
Anyway.
Yeah.
They basically created the Def Jam of the South.
Right.
Right. So
this is another person putting that bug in your ear.
Yeah. So I was at Grand Hustle with T.I. and me and Diplo stayed in touch, right? So Diplo sending me beats for tip, right?
Right.
And because this was after Paper Planes, and like he was like trying to get into like branching out and getting placements, so he was sending me stuff and I was sending him stuff, whatever, and he was like encouraging me to kind of branch out. And then Coach would also come by the studio all the time and be like, Daniel, man, like, what are you doing, bro? What are you doing? Because I was trying to push records that were like forward thinking, like at the time, all the records were like big horns, big, like, 808s, trap rolls, but like these kind of huge orchestral kind of things.
Right.
And I was doing like weird, like synths and like kind of like taking these elements from like, just weird dance music and putting them in the kind of this rap context. But for the artist, it's
hard to connect.
It's too far out.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm like, this is where it's headed. I'm trying to put you up for the future. And Coach saw it. And Coach was like, man, just you need to do your own thing. And so Coach was the one that got me, like, he all the early remixes that we did, like the Gucci Lemonade remixes or the Waka Oh Let's Do It remixes, like, yeah, all of those records, Coach got me the vocals for. Like when the records were being cut.
That's amazing, man, because that's so specific. That could have only happened to you. You know what I mean? With your background and your work and those connections. That I think that's really important. And maybe we should also say that, Heroes and Villains at its inception was a duo. Who was your partner in that?
Pete.
And how did you know Pete?
So Pete was one of my best friends, and he was from Savannah. And so he was also like a DJ with me in Savannah, but he was a little bit older than I was. And so I was in the studios and I was working on music, and he was like working just kind of like this like a job in Savannah, and he has a family, and he was doing that thing. And I was like, look, I'm going to go do this. Do you want to, he's my best friend. So I'm like, do you want to do it with me?
Yeah.
And so then we kind of like conjoined forces. And we had these kind of different visions, I think, of what it could be. And it would work on a lot of times, and then sometimes it didn't work.
Right. Well, sure. I think that's
it is what it is.
Any creative partnership that'll happen. At a certain point, I have to assume that the drug use came to a head with your aspirations for a career.
Yeah, for sure. So I've left the studios. I started DJing. I created Heavy with Mayhem. We ran that. And at the time, I mean, I was just doing that show a month.
Right. Which is a lot of free time.
Well, it's a lot of free time, and it's also not like, I think the night was really successful.
I see what you're saying.
But it wasn't successful enough monetarily to
I see what you're saying.
Yeah. To like run it for like, pay bills for like the month. So this was really tight. And we ran that, and it got more and more popular, and then people kind of started booking me like at other nights or whatever around that. And then right before, like I started getting booked outside of Atlanta, and this was like before like EDM trap kind of had like taken off. So this is like 2011. And I started doing shows, and I started like kind of doing like loose tours, but I had like no booking agency, none of that.
Right.
And
I mean,
that's
who
when
else
it hit ahead.
Okay. And sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but you're pushing this EDM trap sound. I just think it's worth mentioning at the start. I mean, there was almost no one else doing that, right?
No.
I mean, it was you and Flosstradamus and...
Yeah. And even with like Floss. So we did this remix of Roscoe Dash Show Out, and Floss used to play it every show. And, they've credited me like as for being like one of the key inspirations of even them doing like the original Dawn remix.
Right.
And
yeah, because you were doing it before there was even a term for it.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And I have like an email where it's just like me, like, Floss and Diplo on it.
Yeah.
And it's and I think Mayhem's on it. And it's just the original Dawn remix, like the beta bounce of it. And they were like, we don't know if this is good or not.
Yeah.
Can you let us know? And like when I heard it, I was like, oh, this is the record. This is the one. This is the record that's gonna just break this whole thing out. Yeah. Amazing. And it was just an amazing like just time of creativity and friends and this kind of just wellspring. I will say like the first record that I heard that like nailed it, where I was like blown away, was Essex Bricks.
I remember that record.
Yeah, and I had heard that, and I was like, "What is this?" It just sounds like a Lex Luger instrumental.
Right.
And it was this kid in London that made it, and I was like, "Oh my God!" Like he did it. He cracked the formula. Like this is a rap record.
Right, and you see the potential.
But it was hard enough to play in a dance or a club setting or dance setting.
Yeah. Man. Okay. So with all this excitement coming in and you sensing that maybe the moment is imminent for, kind of this thing that you've known for a long time, how did you end up, dealing with the drugs and the addiction that was in your life?
Well, I had hit like a number of bottoms throughout my using career, just different car wrecks, just overdoses, just different bottoms, and like nothing was ever really enough.
Yeah.
And then I was out here, and I was doing a show with Com Trues in Orange County. I think it might have been at the Yost. And actually, I think I want to say PD Clicks and Whistles was also playing. I think, and I'm almost positive.
Yeah. Shout out to PD.
Yeah, and I left the venue, and I was gonna I had two or three other shows that I had to do on the East Coast. I had to do like New York, Philly, and like Baltimore, or no, New York, New Jersey, like Princeton, New Jersey, and like Philly or Baltimore, something like that. And my plan was I was gonna get high on cocaine and stay up all night, and then pop some Xanax on the flight, and then sleep, and then be able to be fine. That didn't go that way. I got high, and then had a seizure. I overdosed, and then I was taken to Cedars here, and that was like the final, like last bottom for me. And so I was like in the hospital bed, and I couldn't, like my short-term memory was shot. I could remember long-term stuff, but my short-term was gone for like 2 weeks.
Oh, wow.
It was like really scary because the seizure, like
terrifying.
The seizure like fucked up my brain. You know, I know just a few days ago, you know, Juice WRLD died of a seizure.
I was just thinking about that while you were talking.
Yeah. And so I was in the hospital bed, and then I reached out to some friends of mine, and one person that I knew that had a similar using history that I did, that I was really close with, was Nylan Speaker Fox. And we were like really good friends, and I reached out to her, like, and I was like, how the fuck did you do it? You know, like, how did you do this? And she was like, when you get back home, like, come to a meeting with me, like a recovery meeting, 12-step meeting. And then that was the point where I started to get sober.
If you look back on it now, do you think, was it just that bottom was so bad that you finally really actually found the bottom? Or do you think it was maybe a combination of that with the new support system that you ended up reaching out? Like, did your mindset change in some way?
I think that it wasn't, I had worse bottoms.
Okay.
You know, like it wasn't that the bottom was so bad. It's just, I was just finally done.
Yeah.
And it was a process of sobering up for me. So like I had already stopped like my drug of choice by that time. Right. But like everything else was out of control.
Yeah.
But I didn't understand addiction. I didn't understand the disease. I didn't understand how I didn't understand any of that. And then it wasn't until that point that I was like, oh wait, like I might not be able to do anything. Like anything for me is going to get out of control.
Right.
Right. Like it didn't really occur to me that like a normal person that's like wired, like quote unquote normally, like they don't think like, oh yeah, like heroin's a solution. Like I'm just going to shoot some dope because I don't like the way I feel. Like,
right. Yeah.
Like that's not like the thing that most people go to.
Yeah.
But like even that was like a foreign concept. So so I'm like, oh wait, like this can all get out of control for me just because of just the way that I'm wired. So I need to not do anything now. Was
it hard to be in the midst of a popping off career as a traveling DJ in the clubs all the time and in an excessive kind of environment all the time as you were going through that? Yeah.
So I got sober, and literally within 6 to 9 months, I was touring everywhere. It was like,
I can't imagine
that because I got sober, and then there was like this period of time where we were releasing music, and then we got signed to Circle
for booking. Yeah.
Yeah. And so Steve Gordon was my agent, and then now, like me and like Carnage and like the early wave, like Mayhem, like all the early wave of trap dudes, like we were going out kind of like paving the way.
Yeah.
Like playing, I mean, we played a lot. Like I played like a lot of the first trap nights ever.
Yeah.
You know, like it was like they were testing the market on me, you know?
Right.
Like I was like, oh, here we go. And I took a lot of arrows to the back, like trying to pioneer that because people wanted to hear Skrillex, people wanted to hear dubstep, and then we were put in the same rooms.
Yeah.
Because it was like with bass music, with the way that it's booked, it's like, all right, well, this is the bass music now, or like, okay, it's dubstep now, or oh, it's trap now, or oh, it's whatever, it's dubstep again, it's rhythm, it's like the same rooms, it's the same promoters, it's the same kind of crowd. To be honest, it just kind of fluctuates like which bass music is popular at the time.
Yeah, well, and I think one thing I would confidently say about you is that you've always been a little ahead of the curve with the trends and the styles and the sounds. And I wonder from your end, is there a sense of pride in that you are sort of looked at as an innovator, and I think you can really, plant that flag? Or is it a frustration of you're always a little bit too early to the party, and then after you kind of open the door, a bunch of people run in and,
both.
Eat all the food?
It's both, I definitely recognize like the fact that I tend to be like in the inception phase and early on these things. And like, I can see things that are obvious to me. And this is one of the things that I have in common with Carnage, right? Diamante is like, we have a very similar vision as far as like, we can see things the same way. And like, I always wanted to hear these dance records in Atlanta context. Like, I was like, yeah, the drops just are not hard enough. Like, I want 808s, I want hi-hats, I want rappers on these records. So like for everyone else, I feel like it's like, okay, we're trying to make Atlanta rap music palatable to like the outside world. But like for me, I was trying to make dance music palatable to Atlanta.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
So I'm going out now, and you got to remember, like, I play rap music. I'm from rap studio. Like, I play trap music, and to me, trap music has always been rap music.
Yeah.
So when EDM trap blew and got really big and really popular, and I'm getting booked to play trap music, and now I'm playing Atlanta rap music, and I'm
at the rave,
and people are complaining, or people are telling me like, oh, he plays too much rap music, or you're gonna play too much rap music. I'm like, what the fuck do you think trap is? What are we talking about? And that threw my head. Like, it took me a long time to wrap my head that, these people, like, they really, and
well, I mean, that little piece of cultural appropriation happened almost instantaneously, where dance music just said, oh no,
this is ours now.
Yeah, trap music means what we say it means.
Well, exactly. And me and Mayhem are over here like, wait, no. Like, y'all got this all fucked up. And then, and tonight, they never really wanted to be like lumped in with that. So they were just like, peace, we're out. We're not even going to get in this conversation. But for like us, like, we're like, this is like who we are in our DNA, right? This is like who I am. And like, right. And this is something that we were doing long before other people got here. And like, this was a byproduct of our environment. Right. And now it's been like adopted and bastardized and like mutated into this thing that I didn't really understand or connect with anymore, to be honest with you. So like, over time, as it evolved and mutated, like, that's why I was like, I don't want anything to do with this.
Yeah.
Like, I'm out.
Yeah.
And I told Steve, and I told my manager Zen, and I was like, I don't want to play any more bass shows. Don't put me on any more trap nights. Like, I'm done. Like, cause I was the opening DJ for me to be playing like tear out dubstep. And I'm like, why am I here? Like, like my peer group is like Metro Boomin and
right 808
like,
Mafia,
or like even like Virgil, who's like a good friend of mine. Like, this Virgil is like Abloh, this is like the people that I'm with. Like, why am I over here playing this? Like, this doesn't make any sense. And I'm doing what I do, playing rap music, playing Future, and like, I had a residency at XS, and I'm playing like Pee Wee Longway records. You know what I mean?
Which is actually funny, because now if you went back to XS, you could probably play those records, right?
Exactly. Well, that's the thing. Like, again, I was early. Yeah. So then everyone started playing rap records, and everyone started bringing out rappers at their sets and all that stuff. And, and they all have a much bigger platform. So when they do it, it goes further.
Right. Yeah. When you moved on to be interested in other sounds like techno sounds, deeper, darker sounds that I think now in 2019 going into 2020, a lot of other people are starting to look at, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, talk about a little bit about that transition into, you know, the techno sound and the darker sound, maybe sort of the back half of the Heroes and Villains catalog.
Yeah. So when I started touring Europe heavily, like in 2014 and 2014 and then into 2015, I started getting really like inspired. I would go to the techno nights. So I would get done playing and also playing trap music in Europe is so much different than playing it at like the rave parties here. So, and there's just I love playing in Paris, and I actually have like a really like nice deep affinity for Paris because all they really care about is just authenticity. And if you are just, even if they may not understand what you do, if you're authentic about it, like they will ride with you.
Yeah, they connect to it somehow.
It's great. And I played the first trap party ever in Paris, and with actually Prince 85, who is or Prince 88, who is the Weeknd's DJ now, and we did like, and I was like, there's like 800 kids, and like there's like mosh pits with kids in like Givenchy tees, like $600 t-shirts, and I was like, oh, this is amazing. Yeah. Like this is great. Like this is such a far departure from like the environments that I'm used to playing in. But I would get done at those nights, and then I would go to the techno nights, and that was like my first experience with like real techno and real techno nights. And I was like, oh, this is great. Like it's a more subdued vibe. It's more just kind of about this just overall vibe throughout the night. It's not these kind of like huge peaks and drops and stuff. And, you know, I can wear my Rick Owens there and it's not going to get fucked up. You know, I'm like
the aesthetic of it is
I was
very
like,
good.
yeah. And I liked the minimalness of the sound. And I was like, man, like I want to play in these clubs. Like I want to play in these nights, right? I love playing in dark clubs. I don't like the huge production. I don't, you know, and I think, side note, I think the one person who's done it perfectly is Gesaffelstein. His live show is like the perfect combination of a dark aesthetic, but with like really high production value.
Sure.
It's
and in a big room.
It's incredible. Yeah. It's incredible. But anyways, but I much prefer to play in like dark underground clubs, right? Like MJQ, or, you know, that's where I'm comfortable.
Yeah.
And so I was going to these nights and I was getting inspired by the sounds and all of that. And then when I came back, I was like, man, I don't want to play at these trap nights anymore. I don't want to do this bass music anymore. Like I need to branch away from what this has now turned into. It's like this monster that just ran off on its own. Right. Yeah. And I'm like, now it's 2015 and everyone is like putting dubstep screeches and 808s in every track, and it just wasn't my thing. And so we released this EP, Vultures, which had Lil Uzi Vert on it.
And that was on Ultra, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was like Lil Uzi's first release.
Was that really his first release? Mm-hmm. God damn, that's crazy. Yep.
And released that, and then that had I was really angry when we did that record, when we did that whole project, because I was like, I didn't really connect with what was going on, and I just felt like a lot of people kind of ran with this thing that you know came through Atlanta and just you know turned it into this monster truck rally. And you know, and I was like,
that's a great way to put it.
Fuck, man, way to fuck this up, you know?
Yeah.
But it is what it is, right? And there's no shade to especially any my friends or whatever that, you know, made a lot of money off of it.
No, of course.
I'm not hating.
Yeah.
It just turned into this thing that I didn't really connect with anymore. But we wrote that EP, in definitely an angry space, and I didn't even do any shows to support it. We put it out, and and
that was it.
I told my agency, and I was like, no, I'm not supporting this. I don't want to do these shows, and that is what it is. And took this departure like where I just kind of, I needed to be able to go back home, you know, like I needed to be able to like go back to Atlanta and like hold my head. Like I can't go back. Like that's my home. Like I can't go back to like home and have people be like, oh yeah, like, you know, remember that corny ass shit you did? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I like came from this like in completely different world, and I was like, I'm not connected with this.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, it's good you were able to kind of have that realization, man, because I think especially when you're in the middle of, you know, a successful career moment, when you're touring a lot, when the money is coming in, I think it's very easy for a lot of people, and you and I both know people who have done it, to just sort of go with the flow.
Oh, yeah.
And
I left a lot of money on the table. A lot of money on the table.
Yeah.
But I mean, at the end of the day, I have to sleep at night. You know, like, and I have to like go by, and I have to go by my own like principles and my own values, and you know, sometimes when the artist mode steers the ship, it's not the most financially feasible. Right. It's like, and it can get hard.
Well, and if I do want to just give you a compliment, which is that whenever I do think of you, I really do think of you as an artist, kind of in the classical, like romantic sense of an artist, you know, where it's to me, my vision of you has always been that you're really concerned with the kind of the theory of what's going on behind the product that's in front of everybody, you know?
Right.
And, and I've always admired that about you, man. And where are you at with it now? As far as, you know, do you still want to be that touring artist? Is there something musically or otherwise that's exciting that you're wanting or trying to pursue right now?
So, well, you know, I took that time and
wasn't the end of Heroes and Villains.
No, by any means. I just took that time like off basically to kind of like regroup and kind of experiment with different things. And, you know, I did some techno stuff, although like the main lesson that I learned from that was like, I needed to make like a new brand for the techno stuff. Yeah. I can't release like the techno stuff under HXV, which maybe I could now, but 4 years ago, definitely not.
It's too soon.
You know, and people didn't want that from me. You know what I mean? Right. Like the analogy that I came up with for it is like, it's like if I make pizza, like really good gourmet, like artisan pizza, but like pizza, you know, and then I want to go learn how to make sushi, right? But like, it could be really good sushi, but if you're in the mood for pizza, you don't want sushi.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And you wouldn't, if your favorite pizza spot started selling sushi, you would probably be like, no, I'll just stick to the pizza.
I just want the pizza. Yeah. So you go open up another restaurant, like under a different name to serve the sushi.
Yeah.
Like, you know,
that's a great way to put it.
So, you know, that's like the main takeaway. And now even when I talk to like new artists or other artists who are maybe thinking about a genre change or whatever, I'm always like, look, just do a different brand. Yeah. It's so hard to pivot an existing brand, and even then you may only get one pivot. Right. You know, like even somebody like Diplo, who has created this brand where he can really do whatever the fuck he wants. Even he had to like do Major Lazer and like, you know, LSD and like these different offshoots for the different things that he's doing.
You're absolutely right. Yeah.
And that's Diplo. I mean, you know what I mean? He is like, he's a business in and of himself, right?
He's in rarefied air. Like most people are not even going to get to the point to have that much flexibility.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So with right now, so what I've been working on is I've been doing like back to like kind of all like my roots, where I've just been working on like all rap music again. And it's the project I'm working on now. It's like, you know, it's signed to a major, and it's all Atlanta music, and it's all Atlanta artists, and it's basically by Atlanta, like for Atlanta, and it's this meta statement, I guess, on the Atlantification of the world, because I feel like Atlanta has done a lot to like offer, I mean, the sauce. Like,
Yeah.
if you want to get on, especially in rap music, like you got to go through Atlanta. Like either our producers, our writers, the system, right? Like we set the tone and the trends for rap music, and it's not always reciprocated.
Yeah, sure.
And we still get like Lil Broad. You know, we still get like, yeah, it's all good. You
Right.
know? And a lot of that is because Atlanta lacks the infrastructure, which is something else that like me and Coach K are working on, is like helping to like provide that infrastructure for other artists and for Atlanta. Like even now, like if you have a new artist coming out of Atlanta, you got to go do press runs in New York and LA. You know, you got to do the show at SOBs. You got to, because all the press is up there. You know, like if we don't have the infrastructure of like good PR and all that, these kind of main things that cities like LA, New York, Chicago have had.
Yeah.
And also, I feel like that was another big contributing factor to other artists' success, as opposed to like me and Mayhem, who came out of Atlanta and like we had to like assemble and scrap it all together as we were going. But like artists from New York and LA and Chicago, like there was infrastructure, there was agencies, there was management, there was PR companies,
Right.
there was, you know, you got Biz3, you got, you know, which is the huge PR firm that like represents everybody.
Yeah.
Like, and then boom, like now they control the narrative.
Yeah, that's an interesting way to think about it. I never really put it that way in my head, where, you know, Atlanta is pretty much undeniably the fountain of talent, right, and inspiration. But then the system is not there. That's interesting.
Yeah. And people come drink from the fountain.
Yeah.
And then leave.
Right.
And they're really successful.
Yeah.
And then when they need success again, they come and drink from the fountain. So this project specifically is like, all right, this is for the city.
And you mentioned to me before we even met up that also you're doing a lot of work these days to tie it back to what we've been talking about with, you know, artists either in recovery or artists dealing with substance abuse or just generally needing support as their careers grow. Is that something you can speak a little bit more to?
Oh, totally. Yeah. I mean, that's like a huge part of what I'm doing too. So, I released Novocaine. It was at 2016. Actually, that was the last tour that I did too. I haven't toured in like 3 years.
Wow.
I've done like shows in Atlanta.
Right.
But like, it's just because I want to.
Right.
Like I'll never stop probably DJing in Atlanta. Like maybe at some point, but not for a while.
Yeah.
But I released Novocaine in 2016. Yeah, 2016. And with that record, I wrote that record after I almost relapsed. And I almost relapsed because I wasn't like staying involved in my own recovery, which like I have to do like certain things to remain sober. Like I need to like have a certain level of accountability. I need to be connected with people, other sober people. I need like a community. I need to be, for me, myself, I need to be going to 12-step meetings like on a regular basis.
Right.
To check in, to like track myself, and for other people to track me.
And to not get comfortable, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like, because if I am, I've never been idle going uphill, right? If I'm idle, I'm inevitably going downhill, even if I don't know it. So I gotta kind of constantly be engaged. And so I wrote and I almost relapsed. I came really close. That's the closest that I ever had in sobriety, but I didn't. And then from that, I wrote this record where it was like this very kind of vulnerable, honest kind of record about like addiction and kind of like the relationship of addiction and like kind of how like my perception of it.
Yeah.
And it was with my friend Naz Tokyo, who I've collaborated with since forever, since I was in Grand Hustle. And from that, we did like a billboard thing where I kind of opened up about my own sobriety. At that time, I wasn't open about being sober. It was something that I kind of protected because I didn't want to. I didn't want to be a spokesperson. I didn't want to be like Superman sobriety. Yeah, you know. And I also didn't want the pressure and like the expectation. Like, what if I relapse? Then people are going to be like, "Oh, whatever," it doesn't work, and then that's dangerous for somebody else that sees that. But it's something that like I talked to about like people in the program and people that I trusted, and And I came to the conclusion that I needed to be open about it because it was such a large part of my life, right? And I mean, there's nothing to be ashamed of. And it wasn't like I didn't not talk about it out of shame. It was just I didn't want to set myself up for failure. So I opened up about it, and then when I did that, then Music Cares program, which is the foundational arm of the Grammys, they do a lot of work with musicians. So they'll help you get into rehab, like if you're out of money, basically,
right.
or you know, if your band breaks down, even like in mid tour, and you don't have the money to fix it, like they just help out musicians.
Yeah, they've come up a couple times on this show. It's a really great organization.
It is like the best thing about the Grammys.
yeah.
To be honest, like it is
straight up
a phenomenal foundation. And now I've become friends with the director. His name's Harold Owens, and he is an amazing person who has been responsible for saving a lot of lives. And so they asked me to talk on some panels and to talk about like mental health and specifically around artists and musicians and addiction and recovery. And then from that, people started coming up to me like, what do I do with my artist, or what do I do with my family member, or like, how can I connect? Like, because they don't understand. How can we set up the solutions? Because I had to piecemeal it together on tour. Like I had to like talk to Steve, I had to talk to Zen, like all right, like even when I'm touring with an artist who's openly not sober, like very, very, very much not sober, like I'm like, the only way I'm going to go on this tour is if I have like a sober bus, basically.
Right.
Like, and then, you know, 4-5 dates into the tour, guess what? Everyone's on the sober bus because we got our shit together. You know, we're we're up early. We're going to go get smoothies. Like we're all about, we're like focused on wellness and sustainability.
Right.
Not like doing a bunch of K all night and wallowing around.
Yeah.
You know, so like.
Well, and it's funny, right? How I think even for an artist who isn't sober or doesn't have those routines in their lives, if you see an example of it, a lot of people are just drawn to that without even having to be told, right?
I mean, you know, yeah, like our bus is just cooler anyway.
Sure.
Like, I mean, like we're playing like good music, and like, you know, like Zen, he's like, you know, he's older, like I'm older than a lot, you know.
Yeah.
So it's just, there's just a different level of like professionalism and just cool factor to be involved like on with our clique, you know. You know, like we had like our videographer, had Julian, my MC, like at the time, like we, you know, we're all just mobbing out, and it just looks like we're having a better time, and we were. So, but we had to set that up, you know, and even like when I was touring, like things that I would set in place so that I would not go to the after party. I'd be like out on the first flight at night, like in 6 o'clock in the morning after the show and stuff like that. Things that I still do to this day, or that I did when I was touring. And you know, I still like getting out on the early flights or taking the red eye or whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, they just kind of kept me out of trouble. So I had to set up all that. Like no one taught me how to do that. It was just, we had to piece it together out of necessity and figure out what worked. And so then management, lawyers, agents, artists, they're coming to me like, how did you do it? So then I started to kind of impart that knowledge. And then that's when I like went and did, I was like, all right, well, let me figure out like what else I can do to like deepen my understanding, and also like get whatever credentials I need so that I can like go into all these different rooms and be able to talk to like clinicians and stuff like that. Yeah. So then from that point, like I became pretty in demand pretty fucking quick for like,
I can imagine.
And now, you know, I'm kind of like the wolf in Pulp Fiction. Like, like I'm serious. Like now, like when my phone rings, it's like usually like break in case of emergency kind of thing. And like, I got to come in because there's like a head missing. Like,
wow.
Not actually.
I know what you mean though.
But like this shit has completely come off the rails, and like there's an element of danger or whatever. And
is that a stressful kind of role to play for you, or is it something where I'm sure it's something you take a lot of value from, but is that tough to be in that position?
It is humbling to be in that position. So in my music, I'm the nucleus, right? Like I'm the center of everything, and you know, like my management and like everyone kind of has to like, you know, respond to like me, right? And I'm in the driver's seat. Whereas like this is like I'm in a complete place of service.
Right.
You know, and usually I'm in a place of service, or at least guiding someone who is in a tailspin or is in active addiction, and it is very unmanageable, you know?
Yeah.
But again, the greatest tool is the authenticity. And it's like, I'm also proof that like you can get sober.
Right.
You can do it. And you can also like, it doesn't have to be fucking boring. You know what I mean? Like it is not, your life isn't over.
Right, right. Yeah, and you can still be cool. You can still create.
You can be, and you don't have to change any of your environments. You can go wherever the fuck you want. You know, I go wherever I want to. I can be at festivals without feeling like I have to use. I can be in an after hours without feeling like I have to use. Like I said, I go into trap houses and pull kids out of trap houses if I need to. Like I've done it. You know, there was this one kid, who was like holed up in this house, and he was nodding out on dope, and waited for like he just was not wanting to go to treatment, and waited for him to nod out, and I took his wallet, his car keys, I stole his car. Like I'm serious, like
I believe you.
I removed every obstacle for him, and when he woke up and he started to get dope sick, I'm like, you got one option. You gotta come with me.
Wow.
And that's the thing, like when the disease hijacks the brain like that, like there's no like logical, like you can't logically talk to somebody. You just literally have to limit their options and be like, all right, like this is the way out. Follow me.
Yeah.
We're gonna go through this together.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And they obviously have a choice, but you know.
Yeah, man. Well, fuck. I'm really glad you found your way to that role, man, because I think it's something we don't have enough of. I mean, you know, I've been having a lot of these conversations lately, especially doing this podcast, and I think people are really ready to talk about it more. And we mentioned Juice WRLD earlier. There's been so many, if you look at the recent crop of what has become the new sound of pop music, like all the young rappers, there's, you know, so many bright lights that have been lost recently. And it's just everywhere, man. I mean, first of all, I just want to say I'm really glad that you found your way to where you are and that you're still here with us doing this, man. And it's good to see you, dude. It's been a while.
Thank you, man. Thank you.
Yeah.
And yeah, I appreciate that. And yeah, this is like part of the deal, right? Is like part of the giving back. And something else that I felt when I was like touring and doing these shows is that it was just very hollow. Like making the music kind of like in isolation, then going out and like playing these shows, which are all very self-serving, and then like getting caught up in like, oh, like, you know, well, and we're going to get on this festival. Am I going to get on this festival? Am I going to get on this tour circuit? Like, what are my numbers? Like, what's my engagement? Like, just all the fucking vapid, hollow bullshit. Like, I was like, this is fucking whack. Like, I don't care about any of this shit, you know?
Yeah.
And none of it is fulfilling, like soul nourishing.
Yeah.
And then when I started being of service to like other people who are like me, like that became very fulfilling and nourishing, like at a soul level.
Of course.
And then I'm needed. Like it like I literally like I just show up.
Yeah.
You know, like I literally just show up. Like there's no, I'm not on a press run right now. I'm not like, I don't do marketing.
Right.
I don't, you know, I just show up, like my phone rings and it's like, oh, like this person, you know, is going through X, Y, and Z. Like, can you help? And I'm like, cool, I'll hop on a plane. And it's taken me to like some incredible places. Like, I mean, I can't mention names, but like I've worked with some of the most influential people on the planet.
Yeah.
Like, and it is like more than music. Like I've been in rooms that music can't even take me to.
Right, right. I've been talking about this idea too with a lot of people, is sort of, it's so easy, especially when you're young and starting off, to sort of have the blinders on and be like, I have one goal. It's to be the greatest artist, the biggest, most famous, most rich, whatever it is that you're set on. And then with those blinders, you don't even see all the other possibilities, the alternate realities, the branches you could take. But then if you're able to take the blinders off and to kind of open your mind up to these other possibilities, take the ego out of it a little bit, more often than not, I think, and being of service, I think, is a big part of that too. But more often than not, you end up in those goals, having the original goals, because you sort of just let it go and focused on just being good and being good to others and seeing what was out there, as opposed to kind of that selfish, I have to be the top. And then you find out in the end that actually you can get there, without trying so hard.
And you will have a higher quality of life.
Yes.
My experience has been the people that make it to the top and they do it like their way and the isolating way, they are miserable.
Yes.
And not happy. And I, for myself, like I don't measure success that way. Like they may have the outward success, but internally, like I said, they're a fucking mess.
Yeah. And
that's not successful. And to me, like what defines like a successful life is being good at what you do, like mastering like your own emotions and like, or whatever you're going through, like, and how you react to things. And then the helping other people.
Yeah.
Like, and the people that I know that are good at what they do or great at what they do, successful with what they do, and they also help others, they're infinitely more happy, and that to me is what determines a successful life. And the thing about like the isolation is, like when you have like these artists and they're suffering from trauma and PTSD, especially young rap artists, and they're suffering depression, they isolate and they get isolated, and that isolation breeds, like the addiction just like breeds in isolation. Like that's what disease is. The disease is a disease that separates us, and it separates me from you. It separates me, it separates my connections to like loved ones, and eventually it will kill me. Right? The way that I put it to people is like it's like living with this parasite, and it will use at the expense of its host, right? But there's no way to like remove the parasite, so we just have to like for a better word, kind of contain it and kind of incorporate it into our being,
right? And
like greet it and heal it, right? Because it's like the disease isn't going to go away, right? So it's like, all right, well, what can we do to like heal it? And we need to like address the underlying root causes. Like it's the drugs and alcohol isn't the problem per se,
right?
It's the underlying root causes, which is 99.9% of the time some form of trauma.
Yeah. Is there something, if somebody out there is listening and dealing with these kind of issues, is there any kind of, first step, starter advice, even just like a little nugget of information that you would put out there?
First thing is just reaching out to somebody and communicating what's going on, and having like overcoming the fear of like being judged, overcoming the fear and just reaching out. And if you don't have somebody to reach out to me, but reach out to somebody and just let them know what's going on and start there. Because it's when we
get out of that isolation.
Yeah. Because the opposite of addiction is connection. And that's what heals. It's authentic connections is what I have from my experience. That is the game changer. And another thing too about kind of the isolating nature is, and people that kind of try to consume for themselves and not give back, is things really shifted for me when I started looking to like nature for like the cues. Like basically like nature has like all the real rules, like all the real laws is nature. Like man-made laws, like all of our shit's arbitrary. Like one thing is legal today that is not going to be legal tomorrow, kind of thing, right? Or like depending on where you're at in the country, different things are legal. Like that shit's arbitrary, but like Mother Nature's laws have remained fucking intact forever, right? And something for me that I noticed is like Mother Nature is like constantly like reorienting itself to survive, right? So what is like nature? What is like this universal flow going to reward? It's going to reward the things that give back to the whole. The things that isolate eventually are discarded and they die.
That's a great way to think about it.
So I started like coming to everything, not with what I can get from it but what I can give to it. Like, what can I bring back to this? Like, what can I give to this situation? Not what can I get out of it?
Yep.
And how can my actions contribute to the whole of the organism that we're all a part of? And that's why I started doing this. And like that's when things just really just kind of took this other turn. And now it's evolved into this space of wellness and mental health and working with artists, and then also like communicating that in the music that I'm working on. And even when I'm working with artists, getting to this like level of depth with them that's, it's not a therapy session, but it has those kind of elements to it where we're getting this kind of raw, like real honesty on record, which is something that is very, very intriguing to me. And like back to like my heroes of like Trent Reznor and Rick Rubin, like, if I had to chart my future, like if I had a say in it, it would be like basically what I'm doing now, but just back in this kind of role that I've been doing as like a producer, where I want to work on projects and I want to work on like my own projects with these artists and help them also realize their dreams, but then also work with people and help them with their struggles.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, if you think about that idea of contributing to the whole, I would say that's sort of what you've been doing musically the whole way through, even if that wasn't the intention at the start. Thinking about your contributions to various scenes that ended up becoming these much bigger things, and I don't know. I think that's a pretty good way to wrap up what we're talking about. Yeah, man, I'm thankful for you, and it's good to see you.
Good to see you too.
All right. Peace.
Thanks.
All right, that's the show. Shout out to Heroes and Villains. Great to have you on the show, man. Great to catch up. I hope we can do that again soon. For everybody out there listening, I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. Don't forget, you got to keep up with Heroes and Villains. There's a link in the description of this episode where you can go follow him. You don't want to miss what he's got coming up next. You can hit me up and follow me as well at Willy Joy on all social media. The show is at BackToBackPod. Or you can email me directly, backtobackpod@gmail.com, for any questions, any thoughts, any concerns you might have. That was a big episode. I really enjoyed doing that one. The next time I talk to you, I think I'm going to be out in Los Angeles. Until then, I hope you have a great week. I hope you take care of yourself. I hope you go out there and do something just for fun. Don't even worry about it. I know you got other shit to do, but just go out there, have some fun. That's the most important part. Be in the moment for a second. And I'm going to try and do the same thing. So that's my thought until next week, at which point I'll check in and we'll see how we did. Thanks for listening. Talk to you next Tuesday. For Back to Back, this is Willy Joy. Peace.